All right, gang. Well, good evening. We are on to chapters 13 and 14. Going to get into this right away. Again, trying to keep these lectures as precise and as short as I can for you guys, so you're not spending long hours watching me talk. That's never any fun. So we are on to chapter 13, function rooms and meeting setups. Okay. So, wow, when you get into function space, when you get into the meeting room setups, there are so many different ways that a room can be set. There are so many different functions you can have in a meeting space. The creativity of the clients that are out there right now are absolutely unbelievable. So, and again, they're coming up with new ones every day. So, we're going to give you some of the basics here as far as how a room can set up and why they're set up certain ways. So, again, but understand, know that this is not a complete list by any stretch of the imagination, that they are constantly adjusting, constantly tweaking things. Could be a little part of this, a little part of that, could be a combo, could be something totally different that we're not even going to talk about in this chapter. So, but this will give you the basic ones, the ones that you're going to see probably on a regular basis. So, um, let's see here. When we talk about function space and function rooms and those kind of things, we've touched on this earlier, but we've got a number of different events that are set up in specific ways. Your catering functions are typically going to be in some sort of round. Not always, but more often than not, right? Our breakout sessions typically are more intimate gatherings. So again, are we looking at more of a U-shape, more of a conference style setup? It could just be round chairs. It's open discussion. Talking about your bigger setups, right? Your general sessions. Are they more so going to be set classroom style because people are taking notes from whatever being discussed? Is it going to be more theater style, so it's more of a lecture? We just want as many people in as we can. So again, some of these different types of meetings, or again, those breakouts, will have generalized setups. Not always 100% ever going to be the same. Every client's a little differently, does things a little differently, and wants to tweak things their own way. So, but again, we will see some things from the standpoint of, whether it's small and intimate or large and engaging, that will help us kind of adjust where we're going to see our function set up. So, what do we need? Well, man, when it comes to putting together the function space of our rooms, the hotels that have the software that allow you to pull up schematics of your room and then actually drop in tables, chairs, AV, what an amazing advantage that a client can come to me and says, well, this is what I want in this room, but I'm looking at, I don't think it can happen. I can go to my software package, and we did this, all the time at the Crown. I could pull up my Illinois Street Ballroom, which was a long rectangle, and say, let me show you how this will look. Let me show you how your attendees will be affected by sight lines, by where the AV is going to be at. Yeah, the room may look this big, but keep in mind, if you only want to use one screen, we've got to only put chairs and tables from here inward. If you're willing to use two screens, more cost obviously, but now I've got the entire room I can use because everybody has a line of sight. So these are the kind of things you guys are going to think about as you're putting together function space, as you're putting together room setups. Okay. So I'm gonna get into okay. So some things to keep in mind. Okay. Again, what we just talked about: size of the room. What obstacles do we have? Right? Do we have pillars? Do we have an odd-shaped room? If it's a perfect square, that's one thing. Does it have little indents and niches? So all of a sudden, I really can't have anybody here because this wall blocks them, so I got to have them in front of that. So that takes away from the square footage you have. My room setup, I have, it could be that's, AV's built in. So I've got to have the room facing this direction, even though they want to go this way. It can't happen because I can only put AV here. Windows come into play. How does that affect things? They want to face the windows. They want the windows behind them. They want the windows blacked out because they don't want people looking out downtown and being distracted. How do the windows and light affect my AV? The Grand Hall at Union Station is a beautiful, gorgeous room, but we can't control any of the windows there. There's no blinds to pull them. Again, this is a building built in the 1800s. And so on very, very bright days, especially in afternoon meetings, the sunshine streams into this room. It's beautiful from a aesthetics viewpoint, if you will, but it's awful for audio visual because it will begin to wash out the projector, what you're projecting up on the screen. So now all of a sudden you have to use a higher power projector, which costs your client more money. So all of this you kind of want to keep in mind as you're making suggestions to clients and how you're going to set their rooms up. So other things to keep in mind some hotels only have so much space. So you're trying to do as much as you can with what you have. So think timelines, think breakdown, think setup, and how that all looks. So we may tell a client, yes, our ballroom is big enough to have your meeting, and if you'll give us enough of a break, we'll do what we call flip the room and have your catering function there as well. So we're going to do a meeting from 8:30 in the morning till 11:30. We're going to give everybody, we're going to have a break. I'm going to probably give you idea because you're going to have lunch. We'll have something going on that will take you out of the room 30 to 40 minutes. Our crew will come in there. You know, if we had you set up classroom style, we're taking all the classroom tables out. We're bringing in rounds. They're going to be rounds of 8. You know, tablecloths are down. Table is set. We put in buffet lines. Boom, in 45 minutes, people are coming back in that room and they're having lunch. Again, maybe after lunch, they go into breakout rooms. 3 rooms, 10 each. We go back into this room, tear down everything from the meal, from lunch, set it back up again for that general session, that classroom style. So when your breakouts are done, you're coming back into that room. All of that is something that usually it's a client services manager has to think about. How do we maximize our room? Okay, tear down, set up, even going from one day to the next. Client ABC came in Monday, Tuesday, but Wednesday morning, XYZ client is coming in 8 o'clock. Okay, when we're done on Tuesday, we got to tear that down, reset it up for the next one. We got to keep all this in mind. And, you know, and maybe the client wants to come in ahead of time to see the room set up. Maybe they're setting up some personal items they went in there. How do we manage all that? That's all part about being a CSM. So again, it's fascinating, especially for the bigger properties, to see how fast they can turn these over, what kind of just what kind of setup you can do. You know, whether you're using round tables, whether you're using 6-foot tables. You know, can you use skinny 6-foots? Do you use the wide 6-foots? If we're going to flip a room, but we're using the same type of tables, that may come into play. So again, all of these are going to be things you need to think about as you're looking at your booking and how you're setting things up. Again, we do a lot of stacking on top of things. And again, we talk about, we want a certain piece of business, we may have to get creative. I don't have 4 breakout rooms, so my general session room has to be turned into a breakout room. Okay, I need time to turn that over and clear out everything from the general session room to make it a breakout. What kind of timeline do I need? All this comes into play. So when we talk about meeting space too, you're gonna, you know, we talked a little bit about the restrictions, about, you know, what kind of AV can you use? What kind of sound system can you use? You have to have a sound system in a room, or do you not? Client needs to know this up front. That's an additional cost, an additional expense. Talk about the lighting. Okay, how does that affect our AV? What's the sound system like? Okay, how packed is it? We never want to totally max out a room, because the idea is the client has to have a comfortable experience. Yeah, the room holds 90, but then you can't walk between the tables, and I can't move my chair out without bumping into the guy next to me. Things we got to keep in mind. Okay, function room charges. You know, this is really interesting, and this is where, again, we talked about attrition, and where somebody who is unfamiliar with our industry may be caught off guard by that. Your function space is a prime example of where that can happen on a regular basis. Clients walk in and think, well, they've got power. I don't need that. We can plug into that. But there's a charge to plug into my power, because I have to pay my electric bill. Okay? Your lecture, let's say it's a continuing education class. Everybody has to have a laptop. Well, we all can't plug into the wall over there, right? There's 30 of us. You got to drop down power strips. There's a cost for that. You're going to tap into my wireless because you're going to go in and show people, you know, it's a web-based training program. There could be a cost for that. It could be a cost per individual. It could just be one lump sum charge, right? There's a charge to plug into my sound system. You know, the room's not it's too big. You can't just talk, and I got a pretty loud voice, so you got to plug into my sound system. There's a charge for that. There's a charge for the mixer, okay? Because besides having the microphone or the lavalier that you're using, your presentation has sound. It's all going through the same system. Well, there's got to be somebody there who's monitoring all that, right? Making sure that, you know, when you're talking, it's coming through the microphone. Obviously, when you want your presentation to work, it goes through this way. All of those guys start to build up cost. And so when someone thinks they're paying room rental, you know, for a room they're paying $700, they may assume all that's included. And in most cases, it is not. Okay? So we really have to think through this, especially on the sales side as well as on the CSM side. What does our client know? What don't they know? And how do we educate them? Okay, especially on function rooms. And again, going back to the sales side, I know we kind of hopped around a little bit here in the last two lectures, but when you sell a function space, what are you selling? Is it just the room? Does it include AV? Does it include Wi-Fi? Does it include one complimentary sound patch, one complimentary power drop? And how much is it worth? Okay, it's interesting in the world, in our world, room revenue typically is considered just absolute untapped or unchanged revenue. That's probably not the greatest way of saying that, but there's nothing that comes out of that. Okay, the expenses that we have for running that room, we pay regardless. If the room's empty, I'm still paying for the lighting. I'm still paying for the heat. If the room's occupied, I'm paying for the lighting and I'm paying for the heat. So room revenue, when it comes in, is considered basic, just pure revenue. A lot of hotels push hard to get that. It's also the easiest thing to cut back on a proposal. Okay, why? There's no hard cost to me. If I'm gonna do a now, let me back up. There is one cost, and that's our labor. So a lot of times, what you'll see is someone says, "Okay, work with me on this. Your room rate's here, and I'm okay with that, but I need some give and take someplace else." I tell you what, I won't charge you rack rate for the room. We'll charge you $100 that covers my labor, and we're all good. Perfect. Okay. Or I have to say, hey, this is a popular time. I've got 25 weddings that want to get in this space. The room rental is $1,500. If that doesn't work for you, I totally understand. But I've got 24 other people who say they'll pay it. Okay. So again, you'll look at a lot of different factors when you figure out how and when you're going to charge for room rental and function space. So trying to see here. So meeting setup. The book does a great job of kind of showing you what some of those basic common setups are. And I'll go through kind of a few of them with you real quick. Just to keep, let me back up. The equipment we use. Chairs, right? You'll have more types of chairs than you can possibly imagine. You've got conference style chairs, usually have the padding, maybe a little flexible to the back. Then you've got, we had what was called Herman Miller chairs. They're actually on wheels, they had armrests, gave you a little more flexibility, a little more movability. Then you've got Chavan chairs, which usually you're going to see at weddings or receptions and those kind of things. So again, want to be clear with your client when we talk about what's going to be set up in the room. Okay, tables. Talk about round tables. Okay, you've got 6-foot rounds. You've got you got 5.5, 6-foot in diameter round tables. The bigger the table, the more people that can fit around them, right? So typically around a table, you're going to have 8 or 10. The real big tables, you can probably squeeze 12. You also can take a round table and do what's called half moon or chevron. Is it chevron style? Half moon, usually, I think what a lot of people call it, where I'm only going to use half the table. This is one of the worst setups and space hogs, if you will. I hated it. Some hotels will have half tables where they're basically it's a half moon. That's what it is, and then you sit people around it, and no one faces their back to the presenter. A lot of times you have full rounds because we're going to have the presenter. People are going to have to turn, look at the presenter, and then we're going to come back and we're going to have a round table discussion. But in a lot of cases, if they want the half moon and you don't have the half tables and you're using the full tables, which obviously takes up space that's not being used, keep that in mind. You're going to have classroom size tables. Usually they're 6-foot tables, and it depends on the width, just on whether or not they're 18 inches or 36 inches. Your 36 inches are typically used, you'll see them kind of what I always remembered as a lunchroom table, if you will. They're kind of more, they're just bigger, wider tables. Your 18 inches are usually used what we call our classroom type setup because they're big enough to have a laptop, a notebook, a cup, but they're not going to take up so much unused space. So they're perfect for that classroom style setup. You can get more people in there. Platform and staging. These are things that obviously are going to come into play, especially when you have bigger presentations. You're going to have to get people up. If you have 450 people in the room, and in our case, the Grand Hall, we need you elevated because when you get to the back of the room, you begin to kind of you lose some things. So again, how does your staging work? That takes up space, right? You can't have that first table right on top of the stage. I think typically they told us you want anywhere between 6 and 10 feet from the first row to the table. That starts to eat up into your space, right? You got to take that into account. Now all of a sudden we can't maximize that room because we're obviously eating up some of the space for a stage, which no one sits at. Obviously, there's going to be one person standing on it. Lecterns, sound systems. Again, your AV, how does that come into play? Is AV in the back? Do you have to have someone monitoring the AV? There's that much going on that you have a tech that's working there. That space has to be accounted for. Okay, if I'm doing a dual screen, I got two projectors, I can't have somebody sitting here. I need this space for the projectors. That just took 4 seats away from your total count. All of this stuff, guys, you have to figure out well before you begin to sell the room to make sure the group fits. So, is it part of sales? Yeah, it is. It's not the part of you trying to work the sale with the client. It's being able to go to the client saying, with your current setup, this is how much space you need. You know, you need this much space for your stage, this much space for the people who are going to be sitting. You know, you wanted a break station in the back. That's going to take up another, 100 square feet. So the room size you need is this. Okay, that changes things, right? The bigger the room, usually the more expensive the AV. Probably need a sound system. Again, all of these things come into play. What do their presentations look like, right? In a room of 30, the PowerPoints I use are probably fine. In a room for 450, I can't have a white background with black print. I've got to do it differently. These are all things they have to know. And again, they're all things that you can be the resource. You can be the hero when you say, here's how we're going to do it, and I'm going to prevent you from having the problems that my past clients have had. Bang, 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 bang. We build trust, okay? People continue to come back to us because we're thinking in their best interest, okay? So, what kind of setups do we have out there? I'm going to give you a few of them. Schoolroom, classroom style. Those are the ones you probably see most at a training. It's a 6-foot table, and you can go 2 per 6, 3 per 6. What does that mean? 2 people per 6-foot table, or 3 people per 6-foot table. Now, 2 people is ideal. Plenty of elbow room, plenty of room for computers. 3 per 6 works, okay? I'm 5'9" on a good day, 175 pounds. You put 3 of me at a 6-foot table, we're gonna be okay. Little bit tight, but I probably have room to put my arms up, okay? Let's take a stereotypical mechanics workshop. Everybody in there is 6'2", pushing 225 pounds. They're burly, big men. You're not going to want to put them 3 per 6 because these guys are going to hit their arm up and knock the guy over next to him, okay? You've got to take that into consideration. Who's my audience? Is it 18 to 20-year-old ballerina dancers? I know that sounds totally lame. Who are petite? Well, fine, we can put them 3 per 6. That's not a problem. I can't put NFL linebackers in there who are 6'4", 250, 260. That's not going to work. So we have to know that, okay? So that classroom setup typically is done on a 6-foot table, 2 chairs or 3 chairs, okay? You've got crescent rounds, or again, like we said, the half moons, and again, that's just using a half of a 6-foot table, again, so no one has their back to the presenter. You've got U-shaped, exactly what you would think. It makes a big old U, or sometimes they'll say it's a horseshoe. Again, you can use those 6-foot tables, 6-foot tables 18 inches. You can do the larger ones that are more like 36. Depends on what you're doing, depends on how much tabletop space you need, right? Hollow square, again, think of a horseshoe or a U, but we put another, we filled it in, if you will. So it just makes a big old square, and everybody can look at one another. Great for roundtable discussions. You can have, they sometimes call it board of directors, or they call it a conference style. So imagine you had 6-foot table, and they butted up against each other. So now I've got 2 people right here, 18 inches, and 2 people right there, so we can look right at each other. That's common for a lot of your breakouts where they're smaller and need to be more intimate. Again, the round tables we talked about. You can go 6 people at a round table, 8, 10. You can usually go up to 12. That gets really, really crowded, really cramped. So that's something I know we always stay away from. So those are just some of the setups. And like I said, they're always being adjusted. They're always being changed. And they're always coming up with new ones. So, but that's some of your typical stuff. So, again, guys, we talked about a lot of the things. The book's going to talk to you a little bit about meetings of the future. And again, that's probably going to go more into how we use our tablets, how we use our cell phones, the AV possibilities now, from plasma screens to how we project. There are so many things now you can do. I've seen so many companies that will have live social media, and they'll have screens up. You can see people who are tweeting. You can see Facebook posts. We obviously hashtags now, and have been and are now still huge to kind of follow what's going on. these different companies have brought that in to their meetings. So they may have a total screen up there that says it's all things being said about the conference going on right then and there. It's all live stuff. And if you just came out of a great session, you say hashtag Salesforce, gotta see Dr. LaLupa. He's unbelievable, and his next session's at 2 o'clock. You can tweet that, and it's going to pop up, and we all can read the tweets right there and go, ooh, hey, I got one more I got to go to. Maybe I'll go see that one. So again, it's amazing, guys, the different changes and things that we're seeing now come into our industry and how they're being used within the different meeting structures. So that was chapter 13. So let's see here. Give me just a second, guys. I'm going to close that down. We'll open this one up. All right, chapter 14, food and beverage services. So again, depending upon the size of a hotel you guys are at, and obviously we're talking about convention hotels, 100% of these hotels are going to have their own catering staffs. Understand that's not always the norm. Your select service properties typically will have, they might have free breakfast, they may have a manager's reception maybe Monday through Thursday, but they're not doing a full-blown catering spread. They're not offering menus and then creating off of those menus. So when we're talking about food and beverage, we're really talking about those convention style hotels. So what are we seeing? Well, we're seeing healthy. More so than ever, looking for those meals that are filling, but not so much that it's gluttonous. We might have gone tons of steaks and potatoes in years past. Now we're seeing more, more vegetables, more salads, more chicken. Where did the food come from? Is it free range? Excuse me. Was it made local? How did that affect everything? Was it shipped in from someplace else? And now we talk about sustainability and being socially conscious, and obviously booking in within your own community. So again, there's a lot of different things coming through. You're seeing a lot more specialized meals. Again, we talk about vegan, talk about gluten-free. That's a huge thing. Vegetarian, on down the line. So again, you're seeing definitely trends into being, instead of saying everybody loves steak and chicken, blam, there it is, we're getting more specific and we're getting more down to what each one of our guests would actually need. We talk about food and beverage. I wish we had a chapter on revenue management as well. The revenues that come into a hotel, typically your greatest revenues are going to come from heads and beds, your overnight rooms. 80% profit is what we were making at the Crown Plaza, give or take, when we had our rate set accordingly. When you're talking about food and beverage, you're looking at a higher cost typically for food, depending upon what you're getting, where you're getting it, how it's getting to you. So I believe, as I was always told, we probably made about 60% profit off of our food. So it's not where there's a lot of cost involved in this. From your chefs to your banquet staffs on down the line, there's a lot that goes into putting on a meal. So again, this is not an area we discount very often because again, our profit margins just aren't large enough to take a hit out of there. So keep that in mind. The kind of food functions, we've kind of talked about this in previous chapters. Everything from breakfast to lunch to dinners to receptions. You could have entertainment involved. You could have ceremonies involved. You could have speakers. Again, there are so many creative things out there, and that this is an area for those of you who are creative. You can have a lot of fun when it comes to banquets and food and beverage because, the sky is the limit, and people are always trying to either one-up the competition or impress the people they have there. And we put on client receptions that were off the charts. That had ice sculptures and the luge where you pour the vodka in up here and it comes down through the train at the bottom and it's chilled. Everything from those kind of things to interactive food stations where the chef is cooking right there in front of you. So you have a hand in the preparation and the creativity. You're seeing so many more things, and it really does open itself up for that creativity. Our hors d'oeuvres got crazy. You had potato bars where you had shrimp and mashed potatoes and sprinkles on top, and again, not my strongest point, but like I said, I was always amazed by the creativity of our chefs, to not only from a presentation standpoint, but also then from the quality of food. And again, we talked about it. We want healthy, but we also want to be filled. And that's sometimes that can be a very hard dynamic to put together. But again, the hotels are doing it, and they're really researching it. talking to our clients, finding out what's important to them, and then again coming back with things that make them make their event stand aside from other events. So, other good things for you guys. So again, we talk a little bit about. I'm going to talk a little about attendance and attrition. So most of the time with food and beverage functions, we ask for the numbers between 48 and 72 hours in advance of the event. Why do we do that? Well, number one, we've got to order food. You're typically, unless it's some kind of staple meal where it's a chicken, a mashed potato, and this, and we always have that on site. Not as big a deal to get those numbers exactly, at a certain point because we already have it in stock. If it's a specialty kind of meal, we're bringing in goat, we're bringing in filet mignon, we're bringing in lobster from the East Coast, what have you, then we're going to need to really have a good idea of what our count is because we don't want to obviously waste money by buying food that isn't going to be used. Remember, some of these are specific to the client. So whatever food I buy has to be used here. If there's leftover, sure, it'll stay for a while, but I'm not going to serve it unless somebody else asks for it. So again, we talk about being specific. We talk about where our charges are at, why this is so expensive, or why there's a higher cost to this. These are some of the reasons why. Typically, we're going to allow, I'm trying to think when we did this. When we did our food, we did our banquets in our events, I want to say chef always had 5% overage. So you always had more food than you probably needed just to make sure. We know things change. Somebody gets added on last minute. Speaker decided not to fly out. He's going to stay. We need one more meal. Chefs hate that, but they do they do plan for it. So and again, the food functions are so difficult. It's not like just throwing another chair into the meeting room. We're talking about, we need to make sure the food is quality, is warm, is what have you. So you want to make sure you have enough. You want to make sure that what you have can be presented in the way that you want it and the client wants it. It's a very, very interesting balance. Now, attrition works the same way in the food and beverage world as we talked about in the overnight room. So again, if you're promising to hit a certain amount of revenue, a lot of times we had a food and beverage minimum, okay? So I'm going to give you this room for free if you spend $55,000 in food and beverage, okay? So that's everything from what you eat to what you drink to desserts on down the line. If you don't hit that mark, just like we did in overnight rooms, let's say we allow you to fall off 20%, okay? So 55,000 is the number, or if it's 50,000, make it easy. 50,000 is the number, you can fall off 20%, that means you can come down to 40. You go under 40, you owe me a check. Okay, so if you only brought in 35,000, you're paying 5 on top of it. You're going to get to that 40. Again, need to have that discussion with the client. Need to make sure that that's understood. Attendance falls off for some odd reason. In that 3-day time period, from 3 days out, you initially I thought there'd be 100, there's 75. In your contract, you've already said you're on the hook for this amount. So, maybe all of a sudden we ratchet up and we get a nicer level of steak. We add a dessert. We're going to add a soup and a salad to get them to that number. So that goes back to where your client services manager really has to be able to work one-on-one with the client on what's in the contract, what their needs are, and how we kind of come to the middle ground. Okay. So, when we staff function, you think about some of the dinners if you guys have ever gone to. When you staff this is unbelievable. I've gone to functions that were as large as 4,000 people sitting down for lunch. That's an incredible staffing conundrum to have to figure out. Typically, you're going to look at a captain for every 10 to 12 servers. A server probably is going to have anywhere between 10 to 20 guests, depending on the function, depending upon what the client would like, what they're willing to pay for. So again, you guys can do the numbers. That begins to grow. Those servers all have to have the same marching orders. Here's how we're doing it. We're going to serve from this side. We're taking all the food out at one time. Make sure that, this, again, how important is it that if I'm a vegan, that they bring me a vegan meal? Okay, all of that has to come into play. So staffing on a food and beverage function is really huge, and that usually is taken care of by your catering, your banquet, your catering staff, or your catering director will work on the staffing end of it. But again, if there are specifics that they need to know, it goes back to that BEO again, and it's got to be outlined for them as far as what exactly they need to take care of. Okay? So beverage services. Beverage services are tough. And the reason I say that is, whenever you introduce alcohol into a situation, it can get very dicey if you're not careful. Okay, so what kind of setups do we have? Well, you've got host bar, which means I'm the client, I'm paying for it. They can have whatever they want to drink. Okay, no one else is paying for it. They can tip the bartender, but no one's being charged for a drink. Okay, so the host is paying. I'm in the bar, and a lot of times when you do that, you're usually open for a certain amount of time. It's a host bar for 2 hours. So for the next 2 hours, all the drinks are on me, the company. Okay, I'm buying. Okay, how we have our bar. Okay, so let me back up. So you have the host bar. Okay, that means I'm buying. You have a cash bar, and that means everybody's paying for the drinks when they come up. I want a beer. That's great, sir. It's $3. Bam, pay it, done. So the onus is on me to pay for my stuff. You could have a combination where we're going to do a host bar for an hour and a cash bar for 2 hours. We're going to give everyone who comes in 2 drink tickets. Okay, I, the host, am paying for that, but the drink tickets are only good for beer and wine. If they want a mixed drink, they're buying it themselves. Okay, then it goes back to what is your beer? I'm sorry, what does your bar look like? Is it basic? I want domestic, no imports, red, white wine, no mixed drinks. Bam, done. Is it a premium? I want 4 imports. I want two local beers from a local brewery. I want 1 domestic. I want bottles of wine from Napa Valley. I want so many reds, so many whites. We're going top shelf in the liquor, so it's Grey Goose, it's Maker's Mark, it's all of that comes into play, and all of that goes into the pricing. So again, how you set these bars up, it will depend upon the client and what they're hoping to accomplish, obviously. So now we also can talk about our pricing. Part of the pricing was the host bar, right? Their host is paying for everything. Well, what are they paying for? Are they paying per person? In other words, they said, okay, we're going to have 30 people here, and we figured out from the hotel side that, if you pay $8 a person, we'll provide this kind of beer and this kind of wine for this amount of time. And you're just paying a flat amount. It could be by the bottle. Every bottle that we open, this is usually basically this way called being on consumption, okay? Every bottle of beer, every bottle of wine that I open, because once it's open, you got to, I can't put it back. So even if only 2 glasses were poured out of it, you're paying for the bottle. I break open a bottle of Jack Daniels, you're paying for the entire bottle of Jack Daniels, okay? And then it can be by the drink. And by the drink, again, your bartenders are going to keep track of how many beers they sell, how many glasses of wine, how many mixed drinks. That all gets tallied, and then the bill is given to the client. So a number of different ways you can do this. And again, it just goes back to what does the client want to be responsible for? And again, is this a reward kind of thing where he's paying for everything? Is it more on the client, more on his attendees to be, if they want to get drunk, that's on them. If they want to go beyond 2 beers, he's not paying for everybody. He or she is not paying for everybody to just get blitzed and liquored up. So again, all this has to come into play. You have to talk to great deals with your clients to make sure everything's kind of, under control. Now, from our standpoint, we talk about beverage control. So this comes down to how we pour, right? A bottle, we buy a bottle of Grey Goose at, say, $17. We know if we measure it out, so many shot size can be poured out of that bottle, okay? So then I need to figure out what am I going to charge per drink to then make up for the cost of this and make me a profit, okay? So you would be amazed how many you can get out of that and then what the cost is. I'm trying to think, where we could buy a bottle of, again, a Jack Daniel, a whiskey or bourbon, for $17, the bottle ended up being worth to us $65 for what we would charge per shot being poured into a drink. So keep that in mind. What a beer might go for, you guys know this, you've been out to a restaurant, you can buy the beer at Kroger or whatever it is for X amount of dollars a 6-pack, we're charging $3 or $4 a beer. All that gets calculated in. So that goes back to then your bartenders being responsible for how they control their inventory, right? We're not doing long pours of drinks. It's 1, 2, 3, boom, done. Because again, every one of those has a value to us. If we pour huge ones, it ends up being a double instead of a single. I just kind of cost myself an extra $4 because I didn't get enough out of the bottle. I didn't get enough shots out of the bottle, if you will. So again, all of those things come into play. Your bartenders in how they service people. Okay, how are they from a standpoint of their interaction, making sure that they're fully stocked. Again, if we said we're going to have Miller Lite there, by God, we got to have Miller Lite. If we said we're going to have Grey Goose on the shelf, we're going to have Grey Goose on the shelf. If we begin to run down, they got to go get it and refill it. Okay, and I could share with you tens of thousands of stories about where that didn't happen and how it could affect our relationship with the client, and we lose business in the end. Okay. So, other things here. The book really goes into a nice job of kind of setting out different roles from our catering managers to our banquet managers on down the line, so you can kind of see where everybody falls in the pecking order. But again, with the food and beverage, there's a lot that goes into that, and there's a lot of variables that can go wrong. Anything from food being undercooked to overcooked. You got to find that happy middle ground, right? You like your steak medium, I like mine, medium well. We got to figure all that out, right? You're cooking for 300 or 400 people. We want all the food to be warm when it hits the table, right? But it's not all going to come out at exactly the same time. How do we figure out that timeline? Okay. Again, we talked about the bars. The investment we're making into our product, and then what kind of return are we getting on that? Can sometimes come down to how a server pours. So again, there are a lot of great things you guys need to think about. So again, this chapter is fantastic for that. That is chapter 14. So again, guys, we're mowing through this. So I know, again, I'll be on top of all the grading, make sure everything's caught up. As always, if you guys have any questions, please shoot me an email, drop me a quick phone call, send me a text, whatever it is. Otherwise, have a great evening, and I'll talk to you guys next week.